Okay, it's 5:30. Let's call this meeting to order. Just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight in public, and thank you for the LPC again coming for this reviewing of the KDE draft. I've had some requests that if you have comments or want to speak, to please speak into the microphone. It's hard for folks to hear and for the media as well. Again, I do want to reiterate that this is a business meeting. Again, there's a lot of emotions tied up in it. I ask that we could all just be civil, respectful, and conduct this meeting as calmly and productive as possible. So with that being said, we should go to calling, let's see, call to order and attendance. Wes Bradley? Here. Martina Amshaw?
Here. Richard
Argueta? Tracy Bowling?
Here.
Candace Bryant? Laura Cahill?
Here.
Tiffany Clark?
Here.
Jessica Ford? Janet Johnston-Crow? Kevin Mattingly?
Here.
Dustin McCoy?
Here.
Rebecca McGuire-Dye? Kurt Merrifield?
Here.
TJ Metcalf?
Here.
Amy Owens? Nicole Pinkston?
Here.
Mandy Pouillere? Josh Simpson?
Here.
Eric Shelburne present. Haley Victory?
Here.
Did everyone get a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting? I looked through them myself. I didn't see anything that popped off the paper to me, so if we could we get a motion to approve the minutes? Motion to approve by Mr. McCoy. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Mattingly. All approve, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. Now let the record show that Rebecca McGuire-Dye is present. Okay. Let's come to, we're going to introduce Mr. Stephen Moore from Studio Kramer to review the DFP feedback and possibly send off for DFP for local board for consideration. This is where we're going to consider the feedback from the Kentucky Department of Education, review the process, determine any questions and data needs, and determine whether to send the DFP for local board consideration.
Yes. Go ahead. No, go ahead and pass that one too. I just kept them separate. Okay, so there's two documents coming around, and I'll describe what they are as we go. But we did get the comments from the Kentucky Department of Education. Generally, they were formalities. There is some reorganization that they proposed, and that I'll describe to you. But we'll start just by going through what the process is and has been, and what the obligation of the LPC is. So we are now at this point. We're in step 3. You voted last time to send the document, a draft DFP, to the Kentucky Department of Education so that they could do their formal comment process, which they did do. We asked questions of them after we got those comments so that we could make sure that we understood them. And we proposed corrections, basically back to them, just saying, is this what you mean? So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit tonight. If a document comes out of this tonight that the LPC approves, it would go next to the Nelson County Schools Board. We've talked about these comments before. Just because something's on the list doesn't mean the district is obligated to do it. The DFP provides an opportunity for the board to make decisions, and there can be future changes both to the DFP and as over the course of the life of the DFP. That can mean that the LPC could be reconvened again, or it could be a new LPC depending on the timing. So for tonight's meeting, we're going to review the KDE comments regarding the district facility plan submitted. We're going to review the corrections that I proposed back to KDE. The corrections generally didn't change the content of the DFP. They changed the organization and some of the requirements that they asked for us to address. I want to answer any questions you have on the document, both what the reviewers' comments were and how we looked at those. And then we'll consider a draft plan with revisions at the end of the meeting. Oops. There's three kinds of corrections on the document that we'll review. Some are based just on KDE regulations and how they want things to be presented to the Kentucky Board of Education. Some are based on their understandings of enrollment and capacity. And in some cases, their documentation or records of enrollment are different than what we have had, so they modified those. And then some are ensuring that we're aligned with the regulations and the intention around the DFP that was presented to them. So we'll start with the document that I sent around that says KDE comments at the bottom. So first, this box on the top left, the name that we were using for the academy was not the name that they have on record. So where I've made this note, KDE corrected, our reviewer actually just went ahead and made some of those corrections rather than having us do it. So everywhere that you see KDE corrected, those changes were made by our reviewer. So the next one here, the top right, they updated the enrollment numbers based on their records. He went by the 2019 enrollment because of COVID. They did not take any of the 2020 or 2021 numbers into account. They went back to 19, and he used what they had on record for all of your enrollment numbers, which are the left number in the enrollment and capacity column. Make sure I can see. It's a little blurry, that big. So he wanted the academy, even though it's changing use and will still be in operation, because it goes out of operation as a school center, it becomes transitional. And then he didn't want anything in the box under that. There is no status for a building that becomes used for maintenance or administration or anything like that. It's no longer considered a school center. The next comment is about Old Kentucky Home Middle School. What the DFP submitted to them proposed was that it would be used for both the academy or the alternative school and for some of your career and technical education programming. The career and technical education program does not count toward either the capacity or the enrollment. It's a separate kind of program, so that doesn't get counted here. They only want to see the numbers associated with the academy. So he adjusted the enrollment numbers to reflect only the academy, and then he asked that there's an XX there in that column. He asked that we then determine the capacity that we want to target for that number of current enrollment, anticipating growth if it's going to happen. So you'll see that change further down the document. And then the last one on that page is He just wanted to point out that the percentage of capacity at New Haven is reduced by this number, and we had the discussion, he and I had the discussion that there is some idea that with the preschool coming in, you could end up with more preschoolers there. So we don't really know what that enrollment will be, but he was just making a note that enrollment, as shown on here, has been reduced. The next page. This page really had the largest number of comments and the ones that required the most modification. The box describing work at Nelson County High School, they wanted for us not to indicate that we were going to be repurposing standard classrooms because of the proposed enrollment. They did not want us to propose repurposing media center space, and they wanted to verify what amount of media center space and auditorium space is in the current high school. So I won't talk more about that until we get to the revision part of the conversation, but all of those were, they ended up being just rewordings because the things that he was worried about in this note were not things that were proposed anyway. We just needed to describe them in the way that he needed them to be described. The next one, the efficiency numbers, I think we had talked in one of the earlier meetings that there's a certain efficiency expected for high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools. He asked that for the work at Thomas Nelson High School, we utilize a 71% efficiency for all of that work. Thomas Nelson Middle and High, there was a concern that we were exceeding the model program allowable square footage in this priority. So we're saying that we want to do this work under a priority 1 by exceeding the model program square footage here. It gets to a point where they can't approve it as is. So what he asked that we do is we could put the maximum allowable for the model in the priority 1 and then put the remainder into the priority 5. And I'll show you what that means as we get further along. The Area Technology Center work, his first comment, this box right here, was that the adult education spaces proposed are not part of the career and technical education programming and could not be put in a priority 1 with the Area Technology Center. Again, he asked that that be moved to a priority 5. And then, so this document also went to the Office of Career and Technical Education at KDE only to look at the Area Technology Center changes. And the director of that program sent comments to our reviewer, and basically all that was increasing the size of the diesel program and increasing the size of the engineering lab spaces assigned. So those changes are showing up in red. There's that change right there, and this change down here in red, and then the adult education line goes away. The Old Kentucky Home Middle School, his comment there is not so much a comment, just a statement that they agree with the way we've described the movement of alternative school programming into Old Kentucky Home Middle. What he cites there in the box is the regulation that allows that to occur, and what size that would be allowed to be. The New Haven School, he asked that we move some of the language out of the first piece here. So you can see he's crossed this out and moved it down here. Basically, he's saying that interior finishes, he wanted to be, he just wanted it to be categorized in a different way. And he asked that, he made those changes, and then he asked that I change the estimate to reflect that. So, so that's what that box there is, and then the box under it does the same thing at Cox's Creek. It moves the change to the classroom finishes here down to here. The Nelson County entrances. Nelson County High School currently can't accommodate much square footage of addition, and additions for the entrances was not something that he thought he could give permission for as a priority one change. We may not need to make addition for that anyway. It might be something that could be done within the renovation of the school. So what we've done is just take that, the proposed additions there for the high school entrance and middle school entrance and move them to priority 5. If you pursue a large renovation at Nelson County High School, you can bring priority 5s into those projects. So it doesn't mean that you can't do it, it just requires that they become part of a much larger project. You couldn't pursue them on their own, for instance. And that's all on that page. The next 2 pages had no changes, so none of the priority 2 items had any comments at all. The priority 4 didn't have any comments at all, and the priority 5 didn't have any comments at all. So from there, before we jump into the corrections that we propose, are there any questions so far about any of what I described? As you can see, it really is a lot of moving things around and redesignating things. It's the goal for the Kentucky Department of Education is that we meet your intentions and that we categorize things appropriately so that any funding associated with the projects, whether it comes from the state or it's coming from the district or it's bond money, that it gets assigned correctly. Yes?
And I apologize for not noticing this before. We took off, or I noticed that we marked through the renovation of the kitchen area at Nelson County High School. Is that because it's covered in one of these other blocks, maybe the 1969 building section, or?
It would become part of a major renovation instead
So
of.
it doesn't have to be
isolated
listed
project.
separately?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
What is a collaborative learning and resource space?
It's a classroom space, but it's usually an unassigned classroom space. It's really something that the district establishes how it gets used, but it tends to be more of a flexible space. And we're seeing that across all schools, really, that they're starting to develop spaces that are different sizes and different flexibility than the standard 700 to 800 square foot classroom on a corridor. So we haven't obviously had a design for what that is yet, but it's a classroom type space that allows for more different kinds of functions.
I guess I want to elaborate a little bit on what TJ's bringing up, because one of the things that we noticed when we were walking through Nelson County, and the auditorium part really stood out to me too, is that auditorium is going to need addition to the stage area. I hope we're not looking at decreasing the size of that auditorium. You might be able to answer that question.
So I think the auditorium at its current capacity is not being used. And the principal and the team there really is, they look at the back end of it, not the front end of it. We're looking at ways to add classroom space. largely because the capacity of that auditorium is far beyond anything that would occur in 1 in 1,000 days. So that was a part of that conversation. I think so if you think about the entrance to that auditorium, currently there's just 2 rows that go down to the front. The back side of it could potentially be collaborative spaces where you could use it as a classroom and an auditorium. That was basically, so it does both. You can have instruction in there and also come out and use the stage as needed. I think the capacity of the auditorium would still be in excess of Thomas Nelson's auditorium, which also is seldom ever at capacity, just by the nature of those spaces.
And from a KDE standpoint and a planning standpoint, the model program for a school with the proposed capacity of Nelson County High School and Middle is 5,500 square feet for an auditorium, and that auditorium is almost 12,000 square feet.
So would the stage and the wings get smaller, or like what?
No, it's the
like
where
seating area?
where the entrance is,
Okay,
is
that
what
makes
we
sense.
would more likely look at, just because at that. So as you go into the Nelson County High School auditorium, there's a certain amount of flat area, and then the floor starts to slope away pretty quickly. It'd probably be at that back flat area. Any other questions? And again, we don't know that that's what would happen, but it allows for that to be part of a design consideration in the future. Yes?
Did I understand it right that the state can tell us that we can't build something? Let's just pretend that we had all the money in the world and that we wanted to build something huge. Can they tell us we have to go smaller? Is that? I didn't really understand in the document that came out today in these. I don't have a good understanding of the square footage deal.
They can limit what you can do with restricted funding, especially if it exceeds 120% of the model program. So if the model program says you get 120,000 square feet for a building and you want to build 150,000 square feet, they will say you're going to be limited to the model program or 120% of it, and then anything beyond that would become a district cost. It's not that you can't do it, it's that you can't use restricted funds to do it.
Okay, so you can only use restricted funds for what the model calls for, up to 120%.
120% of the model program, yeah.
But if we wanted to go just full-blown 200% and we had all that money in the general fund, we could, the school board could do that. But I mean, reality, that's not what's going to
There'd be a
happen.
lot of conversations about it.
Right, but I just want to make sure in my head I'm understanding. So the state really dictates to that level how big.
They're primarily worried about the restricted funds, but they would want to talk to you really seriously about the responsible use of your general fund if you went that way.
I mean, clearly, it wouldn't make any sense. I get all of that, but I was just trying to get my head around the square footage deal. So, thank you.
And we'll come back to that, because we had to deal with that in this document.
I think, Stephen, that's an important conversation about equity. They don't want you putting 200% in one building and less in another. Let's say you've got a board that's highly engaged in this part of the community, and they say, well, let's make this building 200%, this auditorium this big, because, you got, essentially, that's where the energy is. They're trying to protect from that occurring by controlling these variables, and also make sure that tax dollars that are restricted for facilities are used responsibly in that sense, just as a larger conversation. If you think about orientation and equity, that's a big part of this.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
You might actually address it in the next section, but the percentage of enrollment, I know it's New Haven, that's a big drop. Is there consequences if we don't meet those recommendations for that particular school? So I know in the documents it says that there's certain percentages for each level. Say New Haven stays at 47%, say that, let's just say the preschool program just doesn't bring nothing in, worst case scenario.
There are not consequences from KDE's standpoint. The reason he primarily wants the district and the LPC to know that is that, as we've discussed, that it becomes less efficient to run that school. But they don't have any KDE consequences for that. Any others? Okay.
I just have one more question.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. So when something, if they propose it moves to category 5, what are the practical implications for this plan when they go there?
If something is in category 5, you can't pursue it with restricted funding by itself. That's why, for instance, a lot of the athletic things have been put in the category 5s in the plan that we even submitted at the beginning. If you wanted to put new synthetic turf at the high school because that turf needs replacement, you would not be able to pursue that by itself using restricted funds. When a major renovation is pursued, like the Nelson County High School renovation, the category 5 items can become part of that larger project, and then they can use restricted funds. So the only way for it to pursue that synthetic turf on its own would be to pay for it out of district funds, out of general fund money. But if you want to pursue it using restricted funds, it has to be part of a larger project.
So I'm looking ahead, when we're looking at the proposed plan, there are a couple of things here that are important, I believe, to all of us in what we've suggested to them. Are we confident that we'll be able to spend those category 5 funds as restricted funds if the school board would decide to go ahead with the entire project?
We are relatively confident. Again, those would require discussions with the Department of Education at the time that a project is initiated. And we'll get to the example, the Thomas Nelson example that I described in the first part, where he asked that we moved anything that exceeded the model program to number 5. The things that are in number 5, when added to the square footage, still don't exceed that 120% of the model program. So they were allowed to put 100% in the priority 1, and then the remainder in the priority 5. But even with that remainder, it doesn't exceed 120%. And the regs actually say that they will allow that project. It's written in the regs that you can build up to 120% of the model program. So for instance, that one, I'm fairly confident there would be no problem in pursuing that. I've never seen, if you're doing a major renovation of your high school and you're proposing to renovate athletics as well, I've not seen them reject that, unless you didn't have bond capacity or whatever. If there'd be a different reason. It wouldn't be because of it being a number 5. Does that help?
I would add to that, one of the things that is important to KDE has been conversations around why, right? So I think in particular, conversations we started 6-7 months ago around reconvening the LPC. Some of those conversations with KDE were really looking at the maps of where kids live. And that's the type of stuff when they see like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I share that to say, I think that they wouldn't allow us to put it on here unless there was a reason for that. So I think that's also part of the conversations we've had in the last 6 or 7 months. I think the priority 5 piece is not a formality, but in a sense it's a regulatory part part of the process.
And that example was one that, in my conversation with the reviewer, he described to me that that's how it could work. That you would put 100% of the model program as a priority one and the remainder below, and that could then be pursued as a single project. So that came directly from the reviewer.
I have.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. Still trying to wrap my brain around this whole thing.
Yep. Me too.
I just was looking at the capacities in each school roughly is the same. Boston capacity drops by 33 students. And I was just, I may have overlooked something. I was just wondering if we address why that dropped.
I think it would just be that with the middle schoolers going to a different location, even with the addition of preschoolers, that was the number that we had calculated. It doesn't mean that that's what it will be necessarily. That's what we calculated as a sort of target number.
Capacity is not necessarily determined by the number of classrooms.
Yes. Oh, I see where you are.
Yeah, it says 383 right now, and then we drop down to 350.
That had to do with when we did the preliminary surveys, when we did the assessments, we looked at not how the building was originally designed to be used, but how it's being used now. And if what was designed as a standard classroom may have made it 383 originally, if it's being used as something else now, that's the capacity that we include in the inventory for KDE. So I think why that number would have gone down is just that there are rooms in that building being used for things other than classrooms. It doesn't mean that they couldn't flip back, and that would come up on the next time we inventory.
I just bring that up because if we go back to the original enrollment, Boston was getting close to the same area as New Haven and being below that percentage.
Gotcha.
I don't know if this is correct or not, but wasn't the capacity, sorry, it's me. I was on mask on, sorry. Wasn't the capacity of Boston smaller than New Haven originally? Am I incorrect in that? Is that correct? That's what I thought. So that's why I wondered if that's why that difference was that way, because even at current standing, it is a smaller capacity than New Haven.
It is smaller than New Haven.
I just didn't know if that was part of that change too.
I think it's also good to remember if you're in the school, there's no one in Boston or New Haven that say they have too much space. In fact, they're both going to say they don't have enough space, just to be clear.
Okay, so to flip to the corrected version, so based on the notes that we received, I tried to address any corrections that our reviewer had asked for and verify with him that we had in fact captured what he wanted. And he ended up returning comments again. So the very first thing on that list is he wanted to change the designation of the academy to a K-12 center. And the only reason for that is that it's the way it is listed on the Kentucky Schools Report Card, which is a reference document he's using. So, so we made that change. The second item I described in the earlier comments. He had come up with 72 as the enrollment from 2019 for the academy, but then he asked me to determine what the capacity target would be, basically how many classrooms would we renovate for that. And we had already established that in the DFP, that it was approximately 10,000 square feet. So it was about 100 student capacity. For Nelson County High School, as I described before, we modified the language to clarify that standard classroom count would not be reduced. We verified that his comment had said that the existing media center was less than 75% of the model program, so I went back and verified that, and it currently exceeds the model program, so I don't know what that came from. But we communicated back to him what the square footage of the current media center was, and that it was sufficient. We modified the language to reflect the renovation of the media center for contemporary needs. There's been a reduction across the state in books kept in the library, and there are other resources that are tending to be in a lot of media centers. The renovation would both accommodate the books that are planned to be there, but also the other resource types. And then we showed the reviewer that the auditorium would still exceed the model program requirements, even if parts of it were borrowed for other, or renovated for other uses. So that language in this first paragraph was changed to reflect those things. The next box is here, and this is what we talked about a little bit before already. We modified what would be added for middle school facilities at Thomas Nelson. We reduced that number in the priority 1 to about a little less than what's allowed. 11,750 square feet would be added as a priority 1 item, and that fits within the model program. And then everything else was moved to priority 5. So the box directly under that is the reviewer's comments back saying, or acknowledging that change and saying, yes, that's now compliant. The next change, adult education, has been removed from the area technology center description and moved to priority 5. And the box under that describes that these changes had been reviewed by the Career and Technical Education Department of KDE and approved. I think he had already put this on the previous one, but he reiterated that the use of parts of Old Kentucky Home Middle School for the academy was appropriate according to the regs. The next 2 boxes are the adjustments in cost. When we moved the interior finish renovations from the renovation description to the 30-year renovation description, when we moved it from this category to this category, we adjusted the costs accordingly. As you remember, there were no changes on this page, no comments on the reviewer's part. The only thing that I did want to point out here, though, is that because so many things have been moved from priority 1 to priority 5, it does adjust the district need number down. So that number is at 41,243 in this revised document, which, given what we have heard about the current bond capacity and what would be likely to come from the state, probably won't affect what you could expect to do at all. And combined with the fact that you could probably roll those priority 5s into the projects that you would want to pursue. And the last page, and this is where all of that work that got moved shows up. So the first highlighted box here is the entry pieces, the high school entry and the middle school entry. We may be able to accommodate those in existing construction that's renovated at Nelson County High School, but adding it as a priority 5 here allows for that to be pursued if that's what the district wants to do. The next one is the Area Technology Center's Adult Education Program. Again, just something that was moved from priority 1 down to priority 5. It also could be pursued with the larger project. It's just not part of what they look at for career and technical education. And then the final one is the one we've been talking about a little bit. The Thomas Nelson High School elements that exceeded the model program are moved down to priority 5. Those total an additional 14,300 square feet. And if those are added to the total, we still don't exceed that 120%. So the district can request to include that in the project proposed up at 1C2 as part of a BG1 when they pursue a project there. And that's it. Those changes have all been confirmed to answer the reviewer's concerns. It doesn't change the content of what you've proposed to the Kentucky Department of Education. It just kind of changes how they look on the district facility plan and where they're categorized. So I can answer any questions about the changes.
Thank you for being very bureaucratic.
I've had to learn to be that way. They are.
It didn't come from you, it come from you.
What's that?
So, Mr. Ward, I'm looking, so did it change the total figure, the estimate that it was provided before on how much it was going to cost to do the combined campus, this particular plan? What is the, do you know the total cost on that?
It didn't change any of the total costs, it just moved them to different places. So I don't recall the total. I feel like it was in the vicinity of 20 million for the high school renovations. But none of this should have changed any of the costs. It just moved them to different locations.
What was the total cost? Do you recall? Was it 52, 53?
Oh, of everything.
Everything. I can't, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I can't hardly see it. It's so small, my eyes, I'm getting old, so.
The district need was 51,434,000, and the district need changes, but the level 5 increases by that 10 million.
Right. But that 51 million wasn't just for the, that was for all of the projects
Right.
listed.
All of, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, that was my question.
Right.
Thank you.
Amy, can you explain the need and how that impacts the district?
So as we talked about at the first meeting, the state every 2 years during their budget authorizes a certain amount of money to be allocated across districts across the state based on that need. So what they do is they allocate a certain amount that can go towards paying bonds. They look at the total district need across the state, every school in the district. How much can your bonding capacity cover? What's left becomes an unmet need, and so then they take the total amount that they have and proportionately allocate it to every district's unmet need. So for us, because this is reducing it by $10 million, we would have less unmet need because our bonding capacity would cover more of the district need.
So now you understand why they put stuff in priority 5. So that, also there are districts out there with 180 million in unmet need that may not have any bonding capacity really to speak of. And they're generating significantly more money in the SFCC than we are. Going back to how the equity formula works across the state, districts with more money receive less. And this is a reminder, this is a good example of that.
So, well, that being said, does that factor in that these figures are not, not exactly what what an estimate would be with today's inflationary prices? I mean, how does that factor into that formula? So let's say we've got an estimate from the KDE formula that this is 52 million, a little less. So, I mean, and there's been some instances, like I'm pretty sure up in Lexington, I've read about, there's been some places that had to halt their construction on their facility plans because the numbers came in so much more. So how does that factor in? So if this is a number that's 20 to 30% less than what the actual cost is going to be, how does that factor in?
So first of all, just to remind you, the numbers on this are calculated by a state formula so that the district need for every school district across the state is calculated the same way. So we recognize that, so that doesn't affect that. But when you're getting ready to do a project, that's when you would look at your bonding potential and go, okay, which projects can we complete based on the actual cost of construction right now? And the board would then choose what to move forward with based on that at that time. This just opens up the door so that the board can look at it in the future.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions for Mr. Ward?
You can still ask them after this. I'm going to go through a little bit more what the process would be from here if this is the plan you want to pursue. As I've said, the reviewer has already looked at the corrections and agrees with them. So if the LPC approves this version, it then becomes the responsibility of the local Board of Education to either approve, at which point it gets sent to the state, or reject it and ask for the LPC to make revisions. I made this comment before. After the DFP is approved by the Kentucky Department of Education, any future revisions could require reconvening of the LPC. If the DFP is approved by the local board, the board appoints a public hearing officer. The approved DFP is then submitted to KDE for authorization to conduct your public hearing. And then the public hearing will be advertised 14 days in advance of the hearing itself. The LPC is not obligated to participate in the public hearing, just the public hearing officer runs that, but the LPC is certainly welcome to be part of it, but it's not an obligation. Is that how you understand it? After the public hearing has been held, and all of the documentation can be submitted to KDE, or to KDE so that it can be forwarded to the Kentucky Board of Education. The Kentucky Board of Education meets every 2 months, so it could be a February Kentucky Board of Education or an April one or a June one, depending how it gets submitted. So that's where it goes forward. I'm going to circulate one more thing, just because those sheets are messy and also somewhat hard to read. This is a clean copy of what that corrected document would look like. So basically, if you were to say, this is the plan that we would like the local board to look at, this is what it would look like.
On the Thomas Nelson High School, the 2019 student enrollment was 1,229 and capacity is 1,000. Am I right in assuming that that's where the number 5 need would come in, of maybe being able to add that additional space if needed?
No, that comes from what we are saying the planned capacity would be. And the way the model programs are written, and I don't have those here today, but they were presented back in the Part 2 presentation. The model programs are set up by the planned capacity. So if you're planning for a school of 1229, there's a model program, I believe, for a school of 1250. That would say this is the maximum square footage you can build for a school of that capacity. Okay. And that's what, that maximum square footage is what they're allowing us to make priority 1. And anything that exceeds that model program square footage goes to priority 5.
To piggyback on that, I have a question, and this might just be my inability to do simple math. But when I look at that, what Kenny was asking about, But we're saying over here in category 5 that we're gonna add on enough room for 500 more students. So at the end of the day, if we did category 5 and everything, would the capacity at the Thomas Nelson Community Campus be 1,500 students with both schools combined, or would it still just be 1,000?
You're correct, that's a typo.
That's what?
That's a typo.
Oh, yeah, something's not making sense. Help me.
I thought it had to do with the fact that as of right now, that's the capacity, but in priority 1, we add square footage in priority 1, which then increases our capacity and allows us to be within capacity at that point.
The current capacity is the 1,000, and that's the number that shows up in black. With the proposed changes, that second, where it says 1229/1,000, that 1,000 should be increased. And
With the priority 1 increase, correct?
correct.
Right, so it's not, I think there might be a misconception that this plan starts us out at overcapacity. It does not. You just have to add those two numbers together. Okay, thanks.
So with the priority 1, I was just conferring here, with the priority 1 spaces only added, so that's the 10 classrooms that are listed in priority 1, that would increase the Thomas Nelson capacity to 1,333. And the remainder of that 500 would be met using the priority 5 classrooms. So we'll fix that. If this is the plan that you elect to go forward with, we'll fix that number to 1,333.
As Stephen mentioned about Boston using some spaces currently that lowered their capacity, we have similar situations across the district, some in Nelson, some in Thomas Nelson. I think that's all part of the conversation, but what KD allows to be considered, other use varies, and that's all part of the conversation. That's our reality is right now. If you were to ask Mr. Merrifield about Thomas Nelson, I mentioned, what's the enrollment there? 720, 725. If you ask Mr. Merrifield if he has any room, he's going to tell you he doesn't have any room. That's just partly because 4 rooms. This is a good example of the bureaucracy. 4 classrooms had to be used in the bottom next to the locker rooms as athletic locker rooms because the locker rooms that they allowed you to build wouldn't have fit more than about 10 kids in them. So the state wouldn't allow for locker rooms to be of appropriate size, so they turned classrooms into locker rooms. And that's a good example of navigating some of the bureaucracy. So in a sense, there's over 100 capacity that was used for basketball, girls basketball, boys basketball, volleyball, etc. I use that as an example to say that's a reality in a lot of our schools because the state tells the architect, your locker room can only be this many square feet. And then you get in the locker room and you think, we'll never use it. The good news is that the state has convened a committee of people to really look at all of these things and do an overhaul of the KAR and the regs around facility planning. Because as you can imagine, schools across the state over the next 10 years are going to be having lots of unique shifts. I use that as an example to say, none of this information around capacity is an exact science.
Mr. Chairman, are you looking for a motion?
If you guys are through reviewing the current plan as it sits and have asked all the questions that you'd like to ask, I say that it would probably be appropriate to make a motion if somebody.
I'd like to just make a general statement and that's a question.
Well, we'll have discussion.
Oh, okay, cool.
We'll have discussion for sure.
Awesome.
Mr. Chairman, just to move us along, I'll make a motion that this committee forward to the Nelson County School Board the amended plan, the final one, the last thing we were handed out. That's my motion.
Mr. McCoy has made a motion to send the current plan as presented to the Nelson County Board of Education for review.
I'll second his motion.
Second by Ms. Dye. Is there any discussion?
Just not a whole lot we could do probably about this, but I was just doing some number crunching. One reason why I agreed with Mr. Chauvin on why we need to slow down, because now I got all these questions and everything. We have a very low capacity once New Haven and its middle school kids are gone, less than 50%. Yes, preschool's coming in, but 55%, unless that just explodes, then we might get back up to where we're going to be. It was revealed to us on the Boston tour that around 30% of our students there are out of district. Something that might be considered because the middle school section is leaving, maybe that is no longer as attractive a school. I may be wrong, they might still come. But say worst case scenario, all 30% go, we're down 10% capacity at Boston. This conversation with the LPC started with school efficiency. Small schools are expensive, big schools are cheap, is what we said in that first meeting, which means both Boston and New Haven become more expensive than even Bloomfield Elementary, which is our smallest school at the current time. Using that same logic, my fear is we pursue this project, the school board will be forced to maybe consider merging the elementary schools. I know that's not the intention, but if this all goes south in the wrong way what we're intending, we got two schools that are only 50% capacity at best. That's just, and of course I know that's worst case scenario for Boston, but that's just something I see, and just something the board or whoever looks at it, we should be extremely mindful of and be careful.
Just to add to that, I've had some parents contact me, and they've also, it's something that really we should all take into consideration, is it's not just, it's not just the money thing for some parents. For some parents, they're not comfortable putting their kids in the same footprint. They're sixth graders in the same footprint as high schoolers, and they have vowed to really pull their students out. So, without that crystal ball that we all keep talking about, I have to agree with Josh that I'm concerned that right now, as Thomas Nelson says, Mr. Murfield says that either they're full, but actually I think the numbers are actually low. Would that be correct? Comparatively, do you have enough bodies in your school to meet the KDE requirements? Is there, what is your capacity?
Well, the capacity here says 1,000. We're at 722, which is the most we've had, and probably since I've been teaching there. I've been there for 8 years.
Yeah.
So our freshman enrollment is actually 212, which make them the biggest class we've ever had in the history of Thomas Nelson. So that population is growing.
Which is a good thing. But, I just think that I would keep current facility plan as is, current LPC model, but that's just discussion, and you guys already know what I think about that. Right, Mr. McCoy? So,
Mr. Bradley, sorry.
No, please. Any other discussion? Mr. Clark?
Yes, I have a question. Mr. Bradley, do you know current enrollment for Bloomfield Elementary?
It's around 250.
What would you say?
250.
250, okay. I was just saying comparably when you were bringing up elementary schools, what we currently are, if we were without preschool at 220-ish, 230, which is currently what we are at New Haven, it would be relatively close to what has always been or stays true to Bloomfield Elementary. Is that an accurate number?
For whatever reason, we don't know. The pandemic impacted Bloomfield Elementary a little harder than other schools. The enrollment in Bloomfield Elementary and Bloomfield Middle both have gone down over the last couple of years. But Bloomfield Elementary, we expect post-pandemic, with the return of maybe some people that help students out for kindergarten or for, and the addition of preschool, they will be growing as well. I think the other reality is this. Our schools are in many ways built to be these kind of very traditional buildings that don't allow for a lot of flexibility and creativity. TJ asked the question about what's a collaborative space. You know, if you currently go to some of our classrooms at New Haven or Boston, even though there's space, there's not flexible space. That's another piece of this that we really want to create, is more flexibility for schools as they work towards the future.
Okay. Any other discussion? If there's no other discussion, the motion has been made. There's a second on the floor. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. So the motion passes. The 3 nays, please signify by raising your hand.
Oh, 3 nays.
The 3 nays. Thank you. Okay, this is just to review the timeline. Based on the action of LPC, the tentative timeline for the future DFP is discussed with the community. So the architect review and LPC is going to the board for approval. Step number 4, correct?
I would say too, after the decision has been made by the LPC at this point, I will be contacting our chairperson, I guess. And I would say over the next few days, if not sooner, you'll hear from her as far as calling a special meeting to move this on to the board.
Well, really, that's all that's on the agenda tonight. We don't have public comment till 7. We probably should have had that before we had to vote, but yeah, let's take a recess for 10 minutes. All right, we're going to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second's been made, but motion's been made second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, I have 7:02 on my clock here. We're going to call this Nelson County Planning Committee meeting back to order with the public forum. There is a list here to sign in. If anybody wants to speak, just add and sign in. So that being said, we'll get right to the public forum process. I appreciate anybody that wants to come up and speak tonight. I want you to feel welcome to. The first person on the list is Susan Rogers.
Can we go over what the expectations are?
Yes, certainly. Before we get started at this, like I said at the beginning of the meeting, I know that this is a very emotional topic. It's very contentious. I just ask that the audience, that the members of the committee, that we all remain respectful. They've given us 3 minutes to speak. I just ask, with all due respect, to try to keep everything as civil as we can. I respect all the folks that want to come up and speak. And so with that, we'll start with Miss Susan Rogers, if she would like to come up.
Mr. Sheldon, sorry. Can you also address that it has to be in regards to specifically the facility planning process, the facility planning. I think that's what it says you have to do.
I think that they should be able to voice what they want myself. Because
several on this LPC made it quite clear where they stood during the meetings. Salty comments, facilitator debates, questioning the chairman's motives, and pressing for a vote. During a meeting this past spring, Ms. Dye, you spoke up against the negative comments and attacks on the Nelson County Board. But didn't this also happen to Chairman Shelburne? Chairman, you have asked why this LPC process was being pushed forward. One of the major reasons, KVE will be meeting in February, so paperwork needs to be in 45 days prior. From the Nelson County Gazette, Mr. Shelburne said his role as chairman is to make sure everyone's concerns are addressed and differing opinions put forward, and I think those people's voices need to be heard. The bottom line for me is that these are taxpayer dollars. Boyle County Superintendent recently commented that districts can't afford facility projects and note that bonding potential won't keep up with inflation. During an LPC meeting, Mr. McCoy, you commented, it's not the responsibility of the board or the LPC to make decisions for communities. From a 2021 dissertation by Michigan State University grad student, Tanner Santiago Dilper, titled, The Community Consequences of School Closure and Reuse. Research shows that schools are important community institutions, often acting as hubs and community networks, serving as venues for social interaction and thereby helping cement community. Schools may play an important role in local economies and may be damaged if the local community schools are closed. A number of studies have shown that rural school closures can have a negative impact on economic stability because when the school is closed, events and activities that used to bring people into the community and generate economic activity no longer do. While cost savings remain a persistent rationale for school closure among districts, a little research documents actual substantial savings over time. Vacancy and reuse of abandoned schools adds another dimension to school closure that continues to impact neighborhoods over the long run. Research showed school closures led to a decline of residential housing values of about 13%. I feel that this decision will set a precedent that in time will close New Haven, Boston, and the elementary schools in order to move students to a centralized Bardstown location. This will certainly destroy our small communities. I want to thank Mr. Shelburne and the two committee members that were strong in their convictions to vote no. No to an idea that still shows no concrete numbers on how this will save $2 million yearly. How it will factually increase student opportunity, or how it will better education for Nelson County's future students. Your no votes were actually yes votes for Nelson County. Thank you.
thank you, Ms. Rogers. Next on the list is Mayor Chris Dudgeon.
I like this podium a lot better. I appreciate that. To the members of the LPC and everybody that's in attendance, I want to say thank you for your service to the LPC. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to those in attendance for coming and voicing your concerns. Over the past several months, we've listened to the leadership within Nelson County School District tell us that the proposed merger plan is the best option for the county moving forward. We've heard several people within the LPC and through community discussions speak of the opportunities that would be provided for all students within the county, which we all agree on is a good thing. What we haven't really been presented with is like a physical list of those opportunities, and I think it was brought up at the last meeting, a list of all opportunities that we're going to be able to provide. Correct me if I'm wrong later. I think it was Amy that stated that there's not a physical list this time, and that wasn't presented. I understand you probably won't know what the opportunities will be until you physically get into the new buildings. You check the staff, the enrollment, if enrollment's went down, if it's gone up, the money available for the opportunities. I just had a couple questions to throw out there. I know
the decision's already been made, the vote, but something to think about, and the board members that are here. How many teachers and staff will be needed once the community campus goes in? Is there a physical number to say that your projections on enrollment are going to require this amount of teachers? How many teachers and staff do we have now? Are we going to lay off teachers? Is there a role for all staff with the community campus? How many students will be attending the Nelson County District? I think I heard Josh bring up Boston, that 30% or so were outside the district. If they move 16 miles, I think is what it is, over to the Thomas Nelson area, how many people in Hardin and LaRue that are currently going to Boston are going to want that additional drive to bring their kid over, or are they going to just decide to go to Hardin and LaRue? Same for Bloomfield. Once you close, how many people are going to want to go to Spencer County or maybe Washington County? We don't really know until this goes into effect. It was also stated earlier, Jack C. on Bradford's and Brooks show this morning that since February, I think a little over 200 kids since February have left the Nelson County School District. That could be wrong. That's what I heard on the radio. Another question I had was, there was a lot of talk with sports. I think your son played basketball. You talked about the New Haven basketball. Currently, I don't remember how many teams it is that Bloomfield has. Two middle school teams? Three. If we combine these schools, and you're talking about giving opportunities to all students to play, say, basketball, those three teams, are all three of those teams going to stay if you add in more kids, or we're going to create another team, 5 teams, because we're giving everybody opportunities, or is it going to be the best are able to play, and the ones that could have played in Bloomfield aren't good enough to play on the team now? If you do create 5 teams, are you going to use one coach? Are you going to have 2 coaches, 3 coaches? There's extra expense in having more coaches for these teams. If you're going to provide all opportunities for everybody, I mean, that's something just to keep in mind. Another thing I wanted to touch on was how much money will actually be saved merging the school. I think it was brought up at one of the meetings, $2 million could be saved by merging the schools. If the committee and say the administration is counting on overhead costs being saved on this building being closed, take into effect that you're also adding on a lot of square footage to these new buildings, so you're replacing one overhead cost for the other. So that's not really a savings. And I think we asked if that was going to be brought up, like where the $2 million, where would that, like the specific cost centers of where we were saving money on this plan. That never got brought up. So yeah, those are just a few questions I had. The LPC process seems a little rushed. It doesn't seem like there's been a whole lot of adequate time to ask the questions, get the answers.
Are we going to follow the guidelines that we established, or are we going to?
They're wanting you to wrap up.
Wrap it up. Okay, last paragraph. I just once you make these decisions, it's going to be hard to reverse what you're doing when you close this middle school and build 2 new schools in the future. So if you're not going to take the time to look at it now and really say, this is what's best, this is what we're going for, come hell or high water, this is going to work. So take that into consideration. Thank you.
Ms. Deborah Brzezinski. Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Sarah Bunch, I'm sorry.
Good evening, and you all, thanks for being here. I'd like for you all to pass these around. Has anybody on this committee received a copy of the public responses from the Share Your Voice page? Raise your hand if you have. Thank you. Okay. So, since the community discussion started in April of this year, I've tried to rationalize the district administration's motives for transitioning to a 6 through 12 model. Keeping an open mind, I requested from Mr. Bradley and our school board for the data used to justify this model. Specifically, how does this model affect student learning outcomes, and what metrics were used to evaluate its success? Regrettably, I'm still waiting on that data. I took it upon myself to research grade configuration models that showed which models were most successful. I found the American Association of School Administrators, the AASA, highly supports the K through 8 grade model, citing marked improvement in state assessment scores and general academic achievement. The middle school ages of child development are extremely vulnerable. Mr. Bradley brought this up at some of his community discussions regarding academic regression between the transitions from elementary to middle and middle to high school. Although he never cited a source, he stated that it was a cause for concern that justifies this proposal. However, the research that the AASA stated that these regressions were a normal aspect of child development, and this regression could be reduced by using a K through 8 model. With this model, not only was academic achievement improved, but student behavior as well. 6th through 8th graders were more mindful of their behavior around younger elementary students, especially if their siblings are in the same school and are in a position of school that fosters leadership. In their examples, older students were given roles such as bus monitor and service projects. It stimulated a feeling of leadership and community among their middle school students. In a 6 through 12 model, you're placing these same students at the bottom of the food chain. The Journal of School Effectiveness and School Improvement also hails the K through 8 model as the best model to foster education. Excuse me. They maintain the evidence of improved overall student achievement and improved test scores with K through 8 configuration. When I brought this up to Mr. Bradley at the Foster Heights community discussion and suggested applying K through 8 models district-wide, the only rebuttal he could give was it's not sustainable, and test scores aren't as important as they used to be. Again, with no sources to back that claim. The previous article also stated accountability measures are used to determine how schools can improve student success as a whole and can determine the level of state and federal funding received. Therefore, it is important to examine school-level achievement scores and to make comparisons between schools with different grade configurations. I asked the LPC and our school board, where's the accountability in Nelson County? I can tell you who does care about test scores, academic achievement, benchmarks, that's the families of Nelson County students. We've heard about opportunity over and over, but we've never had it shown to us. Like Mr. Simpson said, opportunity does not mean academic success. Feeling successful and being successful are separate entities. Would you want to go to a doctor who performed your procedure, who had never done it before but felt like he could do it? Mr. Bradley, would you let somebody work on your vehicle that's never worked on one before, but he watched a video of it? My child's core curriculum should always come first over any of these opportunities. And for any educator to not acknowledge that is concerning. So, a friend of mine also said, I want to thank you guys for coming to Bloomfield Middle. A friend of mine said, you know, why are they just now coming to Bloomfield Middle? Would you all look your dog in the eye before you told it you were going to put it down? Just think about that.
Thank you, Ms. Bonnet. Ms. Deborah Brzezowski.
Is anybody speaking for NC Care? I'd like to speak on behalf of Nelson County Advocates for Responsible Education, so that allows me a little extra time. No? It doesn't?
Not for this.
Really? Okay, well, I'll try to be as quick as I can. Yeah, why? I don't understand.
This is just what the LPC voted on.
I think it'd be advisable to have a concession to let people speak a little bit longer than 3 minutes if they like. I mean, this is the last meeting, but I mean.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try. I mean, I don't have a whole lot.
So what if we just would have to go to vote in order for us to change this, but also we agree to come here, we want to listen to every single person, we seriously do. But when we set up procedures and you agree to follow them and then you don't follow them, it really creates distress for us as well.
Okay, all right, okay.
Take it to a vote, then take it to a vote.
All right,
You want to go on and follow procedures.
Okay, point of order.
Sorry, I'll do it in 3 minutes.
Point of order. If you can't, let's try to keep it at 3 minutes.
I'll do my best.
We'll try to, and I apologize for that because I think everybody's voice should be heard, but just to get this, yes, go ahead.
I didn't mean to be hostile.
Again, we really do want to hear, and I don't want to take your time, so I don't want to beat you up here. Don't say that the rest of us don't want to hear. When you make that statement, it makes it sound like the rest of us are here to say we don't want to hear what they have to say.
Okay, all right, let's get this meeting, we're going to keep this meeting proceeding. Let's try to keep it at 3 minutes. And I wasn't trying to insinuate that nobody wanted to hear it, but I mean,
We do want to hear what you
okay,
have to say.
all right, thank you.
And I will. I mean, I don't have a whole lot planned, but just in case, I didn't want to be interrupted, because I know that threw somebody off with their thoughts, so. First off, thank you for allowing us to have comments. It is somewhat of a slap in the face, though, for you guys to vote and pass this before you listen to our comments. I mean, we all know it was going to pass, but still, it's just basically makes it look like it really doesn't matter what we have to say. So I'll jump right into it. Again, it doesn't make a difference, but maybe the board who's here will listen. I really questioned the traffic study that was brought to attention at the last meeting. Sure, there's lots of room to expand the traffic patterns at Nelson County and Thomas Nelson parking lots, but boy, where are you going to expand at Highway 62? 245 has a little room, but 62 sure doesn't. And anybody that goes in that area in the afternoon sees the backup. My next thought process is, we don't know how much this is going to cost. We're going on the estimates that the KDE has given us, which is $52 million. It's really monopoly money at this point because we don't know what $52 million in real dollars are. And for that reason, I think it's very, very important that our board utilizes their right of the Kentucky Revised Statutes, KRS 162.080. Upon the request of the Board of Education and of any district, the county clerk shall submit to the qualified voters of the district the question as to whether or not bonds shall be issued for the proposed purpose to, and I'm going to paraphrase here, to enlarge sites for school buildings, purchase new sites, remodel or restore buildings. The board shall make a careful estimate of money required for this purpose and shall determine the amount of monies for which bonds shall be issued. Please, to the Board of Education, listen to the people of your county. Find out how they really feel about this proposed merger. Yes, we want the best opportunities for our children, but we also have to look at the cost. We have to look at what our future enrollment will be. January of '22, our numbers could be all over the place with school choice. We have schools that are bordering county lines. We have no idea where our numbers are going to be. And I can guarantee you, if these community schools become the fact, our enrollment will be down. And we need to make sure we have the numbers and the dollars to support that. So again, KRS 162.080. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilczewski. Rhonda Walton.
I graduated from Nelson County in 1986. My son graduated in 2017. My daughter will graduate this year. How will it affect me if this goes through? If my children stay in this county, my grandchildren will go to school here. My boyfriend's son will be one of the first classes affected if this goes through. He is a Bloomfield student. I hope that he doesn't have to endure that because he has enough to deal with. The Nelson County school system has lost many teachers, I know personally the ones that have left since this decision started, that have gone to LaRue in Washington County. Since the decision was announced, it is approved by this committee, the Boston principal gave notice that she is leaving for the Bardstown schools. That is where my grandmother-in-law is from. I feel that this goes through, this will continue to happen. Middle schoolers will be forced to go to middle school with increased exposure to older children. My children were concerned of this for the future students. I know this will affect their mental health. There's enough bullying in the school to putting these younger students with the older students. You may say they will be in a separate building wing, but that's the same statement in 1986 when they moved the freshmen to the high school, as I was the last Nelson County Senior High School class. I see it in the emergency room. Come to my emergency room here in Nelson County and see the bullied kids, the suicidal kids that are wanting to kill themselves. It is going on now. It doesn't need to be increased. Did you all have true traffic studies in front of Nelson County High School and Thomas Nelson? I go by there every day based on my travel pattern, both schools. There's not studies. 62 is backed all the way up to 245 most days. The buses sit and wait to pull out of Thomas Nelson to get to where they need to go because traffic is impossible. It also stated that there will need to be more bus drivers. We don't have enough now. Jeff Marchese is battling that. Where are you going to find them? Bullitt County doesn't have them. The change in community schools will adversely affect the businesses. I've heard people say that the schools aren't there to support the businesses, but the businesses support the schools and the teachers and the parents. The parents may be employed by those businesses. They no longer will be there if the schools move. Students need to be in the school learning from a direct teacher instruction. I've read that the plan pushes more off-campus work-based learning for juniors and seniors. We do not need to push for our kids out sooner. Teachers are there to teach. Our children need direct instruction. COVID killed a year of school for our kids. Our children need to stay in the schools. Most important is many parents and taxpayers do not want this. Calling it a community plan when you're taking a kid out of their communities is just not logical. Where are the rural schools that have undergone the same plan that have been prospered? How many students when the Nelson County system plan goes through? Any new bonds that we're needing need to be voted on, as others have said. Our kids need to stay where they are and improve from there. Fix the problems, do not make more.
Suzanne Thornton.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Thornton. I live 1530 Chapel Taylorsville Road, Bloomfield, Kentucky. I only have a couple of things I want to say. Have you taken into consideration how many children you're going to lose in your district that's going to be pulled out to be homeschooled? The poll we've already taken is showing over 150 children once this merger goes through. My two will be two of them. The criteria you're teaching, I'm not satisfied with. My third grader comes home with a report card that says she's career ready. My third grader, okay? My ninth grader, she takes medication. She has high functioning autism. She called me from school yesterday morning. Mama, I only have one pill left. I forgot to tell you. Take the pills to school. The nurse says, I can't believe a high schooler forgets to tell you. She has high functioning autism and the nurse don't even know. She has mild mental retardation. The nurse don't even know. Our school system needs repair, not merged. But they're not on a personal level anymore. Our smaller schools need to get back to the smaller schools, get back on a personal level. My third grader comes home today. She has facial tics. Mom of 3 kids asked me why I was rolling my eyes at her. Can the teacher help? No, she's overcrowded. Shouldn't have time to get on a personal level. Take us back to where we need to be. Not all this other crap anymore. So next year I'm homeschooling, along with a lot of other parents. Thank you.
That concludes the list of of folks that were wishing to speak tonight. Would anybody like to add to that conversation? Or would anybody like to?
Do you guys want to debrief like we've done in the past, or are you guys good to adjourn?
If no one wants to add to that conversation, we've already voted.
I want to add something. I want to add. I think we've grown into a society of speculation, and I want to clarify one thing for sure on Boston's principal. Call her. Don't speculate why she left Boston. Give her the chance to speak to you honestly, because she will give you the truth. But there has been nothing but speculation since she announced her transition into Bardstown School. And it breaks my heart because I know why she's leaving. But she's too good of a person to get on Facebook and clear it up. So call her. I promise you she will talk to you about it. And the question was brought up about the Boston school students that live on that are out of district. There are a lot of out of district students that go to Boston, that go on to Thomas Nelson, that is still out of district. We see it all the time, every year. Multiple friends of my daughters are from out of district, and they continue to transition with their friends to Thomas Nelson.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for everyone that came out to speak tonight. I appreciate you all taking time out of your day to get involved with this process. With that, do we have a motion to adjourn? Motion made by TJ Metcalf, second. Evan Mattingly, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion will carry.